In 2020, there was an incident that took place at my granddaughter's school.
For years, the truth behind Marcus Lamb's death remained a mystery, until now. A secret diary, hidden from the public, has finally surfaced, and what's written inside changes everything we thought we knew. Joni Lamb's private thoughts revealed dark details, shocking motives, and a side of their story no one saw coming. Was it grief? Or something far more disturbing? This isn't just a revelation. It's a bombshell. What happens next could shake the entire Christian world to its core. It all started with what looked like a tragedy. A sudden, heartbreaking loss that sent shockwaves through the Christian world. Marcus Lamb, the bold and charismatic leader of Daystar Television Network, passed away in November 2021. The official cause was complications from COVID-19. He had been an outspoken voice against lockdowns and vaccine mandates, so when he contracted the virus and passed so quickly, it was seen by many as tragic irony. For a while, everyone was focused on mourning, viewers, followers, friends, and family, but as the dust began to settle, quiet doubts started to surface. People who had been close to Marcus began to feel like something wasn't quite right. The timeline felt rushed. The way things played out didn't add up for everyone. Some even started to ask the unthinkable. Was this just a medical tragedy? Or could there be more behind Marcus's death than anyone wanted to admit? Those whispers didn't start with strangers online. They began with people who knew the Lamb family, those who had worked with Marcus closely, people who had seen things that didn't quite sit right. At first, it was just discomfort. Then it became suspicion.
We turn now to Texas, where controversial Christian television CEO Marcus Lamb has died after his battle with COVID-19. The conservative televangelist making headlines this past year after his network, Daystar, dedicated hours of broadcasts to anti-lockdown and anti-vaccination activists and groups.
Joni Lamb, Marcus's wife and longtime partner in ministry, stepped into the spotlight almost immediately after his passing. She gave emotional interviews, talked about her loss, and thanked supporters for their prayers. But before long, people started noticing something odd: how quickly things were moving. Just weeks after Marcus's death, Joni appeared increasingly close to Doug Weiss, a counselor with his own complex background, and as their connection grew, so did the rumors. Had they known each other more intimately before Marcus died? Was this really grief pulling them together? Or had there been something going on all along? For those inside the Daystar network, things became tense. Staff members and family insiders began noticing shifts, decisions being made faster, some voices being shut out, and Joni taking on more control than ever before. It wasn't just about her grief anymore. People were beginning to wonder if Marcus's death had cleared the way for something and someone new. The whispers got louder when Doug Weiss filed for divorce just 2 months after Marcus's passing. The timing felt off, too perfect, like everything was falling into place a little too easily. Some began to suspect that Marcus's death wasn't just a turning point. It might have been the first domino in a chain of events that had been planned all along. Was Marcus sick for longer than they let on? Were there decisions made behind closed doors that no one talked about? These weren't conspiracy theories being pushed by outsiders. These were questions coming from within the Lamb circle. People who had loved Marcus and didn't like what they were seeing. And in the middle of all this was the most painful question of all. Did Joni know more than she was saying?
My last night with Marcus at the hospital, I was taking care of him, and at around 3 o'clock in the morning, she said to me, she just looked at me in this dark room. I'm there serving, and she looked at me and she said, "Look what you have done to this family." I remember texting my mom saying, "I can't do this anymore. I told God, you feel the pain of my heart. Me and my child are ruining this family." And I said, "I know, my God, you're protective of me. You'll get me out of here." That was my last night. The next day, he dies.
No one wanted to believe it. Not at first. But the more details came out, the rushed relationship, the control over the narrative, the shifting leadership at Daystar, the harder it became to ignore. What started as a tragic death was slowly turning into something far more complicated. And for those who once trusted Joni and the ministry, doubt was beginning to replace faith. It didn't take long after Marcus Lamb's death for people to start asking questions. At first, it was all about grief. The man had been a powerful voice in Christian broadcasting, a spiritual leader with a massive following. His sudden passing hit people hard, especially those closest to him. But as the weeks went by, the story began to shift. Whispers grew louder. People started noticing something strange about the way Joni Lamb, Marcus's widow, was behaving. She wasn't just grieving, she was moving on. And fast. Enter Doug Weiss. Doug was a well-known Christian counselor, someone who had built his career around helping people heal from addiction, failed marriages, and broken faith. On the surface, he seemed like a good guy, calm, wise, grounded in faith. So when Joni started spending time with Doug after Marcus's death, many thought it was just a friendship. Maybe he was helping her cope with the loss, guiding her through her pain, offering comfort in a time of chaos. But it didn't stay that simple. Very quickly, the tone of their relationship began to change. It was no longer just two hurting people leaning on each other. They were showing up together at events, speaking in ways that felt too personal, too intimate. There were social media posts, smiles that seemed more than friendly, body language that raised eyebrows. And before anyone could fully understand what was happening, the rumors started flying. Joni and Doug weren't just friends. They were something more. What shocked everyone wasn't just that Joni had found comfort in someone else. It was how fast it all happened. Marcus had barely been gone 2 months when Doug filed for divorce from his wife of over 30 years. That's when the timeline started to feel suspicious. People started putting the pieces together. How could a man go from a decades-long marriage to pursuing a new one so quickly? And how could Joni, who had just lost her husband, be ready to step into a new relationship almost overnight? It didn't make sense, at least not to the people who were watching closely.
I went to Daystar one afternoon to grab something from the cafe. There was something in the green room, and I had my child with me, and I knew she was scared at this point, so we didn't take her there anymore. We had a nanny at home with her. But this one time, I wanted to pick up something really quick. I go in there, it's in the afternoon, I didn't think anyone would be in the green room. And I take her with me, and it's horrible. I go to grab that box of food, and in walks Pete and, his spouse. And my child was so full of terror, her body went completely limp, and she fell under the table hard. I grabbed her little body, I picked her up, and I ran into the car. And I remember telling other family members about it, the ones I trusted, and it was traumatic. I was like, I'm not bringing my child here.
And this wasn't just idle gossip. This was coming from people who had been around the Lamb family for years. Insiders, staff members, friends, even Joni's own children. Jonathan and Susie Lamb, Marcus and Joni's son and daughter-in-law, began to raise concerns publicly. They spoke out about how uncomfortable they were with Joni's choices, how fast everything was moving, and how it felt like the values their family once stood for were being replaced by something else entirely. To them, it wasn't just about timing. It was about trust, about loyalty, about whether Joni was really grieving or already planning her next chapter. What made it all even more confusing was Joni's public response. She didn't shy away from the rumors. In fact, she defended herself. She said Doug had been a blessing to her and her family. She talked about how God had brought them together, how they had prayed for each other, leaned on each other, and found love in the middle of their pain. She insisted that there was nothing inappropriate going on, that their relationship was clean, godly, and grounded in faith. But for many people, those words rang hollow, because actions speak louder.
They did show me some stuff, text messages, emails, and some other paperwork that I said, okay, now I'm going to have to go back and talk to Jonathan and Susie, and I'm going to do that this morning to hear their side. But what I will not do, I'm not going to keep going back and forth. I saw what they showed me. I heard both sides of the story. I felt some things in the spirit when I was talking to Jonathan and Susie. I definitely felt some things, when I went to Daystar. And I'm going to post this interview today. I'm going to let everybody chop it up, dissect it, criticize, say, hey, I'm gonna post the interview because that's the fair thing, the right thing. People can feel whatever they want to feel about it. And then I'm gonna make a third and final video where I share, what they showed me, there's some stuff they showed me and it was like, I have to go talk to Jonathan and Susie. And then I'm gonna get Jonathan and Susie's response to, the things that they showed me. And I already started talking to them about it. And I'm gonna make the final video and I'm gonna wash my hands of it.
Doug Weiss wasn't just a counselor. He was someone with experience in navigating brokenness, someone who should have known that healing takes time, that grief isn't something you rush. And yet here he was, stepping into the role of partner, protector, even potential husband. Before Marcus's memory had even begun to settle, people felt betrayed, not just by Joni, but by the whole image they had once believed in. This was Daystar. This was supposed to be a ministry built on trust, family, and faith. And now it was starting to look like a soap opera. Like something calculated, planned. Some asked, had Doug and Joni been close before Marcus died? Had there been feelings between them that no one knew about? Was Doug already waiting in the wings while Marcus was battling COVID? These were heavy questions, and Joni didn't exactly help to calm the storm. Instead of addressing the rumors head-on, she often deflected. She would post about love and healing, about letting God be the judge. She painted herself as the victim of a smear campaign, suggesting that people just didn't understand how grief worked. But it wasn't just outsiders questioning her anymore. It was her own family, her own staff, people who had loved her for years. The most painful part of all this wasn't just the rumors, it was the division it caused. The Lamb family began to fracture. Jonathan and Susie were clearly heartbroken. They weren't just losing a father, they felt like they were losing their mother too. They didn't recognize the woman who now stood so confidently beside Doug Weiss. They didn't understand how Joni could move on so fast, or why she seemed so defensive when they brought up their concerns. They were interested in art and film, a motive too bright.
Jonathan's disappointment in not getting his way only deepened when I married Dr. Doug Weiss, who has been such a blessing to me, the rest of my family, and Daystar. I can tell you that as a mother, as a grandmother, this situation saddens me deeply, and it grieves my heart because I love my family. I love all my children. I love my grandchildren. I love the work we've done together for so many years. And I had hoped that we could have resolved the situation in private. But now, Jonathan has given me no choice except to speak out. Everyone knows that we have dedicated our lives to spreading the love of Jesus. And to see it attacked by my son Jonathan and his wife is truly heartbreaking. I want to assure you that all the allegations that are circulating against myself and my late husband are completely false.
And they weren't the only ones. Supporters of Daystar began to question what was really happening behind the scenes. Donations slowed, viewers dropped off. People who had once tuned in faithfully every week now watched with doubt. They wondered if the network was still about spreading God's word, or if it had become about protecting a personal agenda. All of this came to a head when Joni and Doug announced their engagement. For some, it was the final straw. Not even a full year after Marcus's death, and she was already preparing to walk down the aisle again. It felt rushed. It felt disrespectful. And for many, it confirmed their worst fears, that this wasn't about love at all. It was about power. Control. Filling a vacuum Marcus had left behind, Joni insisted that she was simply following her heart, that God had led her to Doug, that after so much pain, she deserved a second chance at love. But her critics weren't convinced. They saw the pattern, the speed, the silence around important questions, and they weren't ready to let it go.
Yes, that's true, but also I would add that since this is such a absolutely deeply traumatic thing that we've gone through, obviously us sitting here can never fully express what we've walked through in these past few years. I mean, I don't even want to get into the process of what that looked like, but it was excruciatingly painful. So yes, there is that freedom in not having to depend on a few people and keep begging for justice and having it minimized and turned down and, just hitting a wall, like a dead end. There's peace and satisfaction now. When the story came out and the way people received it, and I felt like the floodgates of justice opened on us. When everyone validated what we as parents felt, we really wanted to do a short video. This is not the time or place that we want to get into our whole story. Jonathan and I just quickly grabbed the camera, sat down here to address a few questions.
In the end, it wasn't just about Joni and Doug being too close too fast. It was about what that closeness represented. A shift in values, a break in trust, and a growing fear that the people leading one of the biggest Christian networks in the world might not be as transparent or as faithful as they once seemed. The questions haven't stopped, the wounds haven't healed, and for those who once looked up to Joni as a model of strength and devotion, the shock of it all still lingers. What happens next? Only time will tell. But the damage is done. And the story of Joni and Doug has become more than just a love story. It's become a symbol of everything people are afraid is wrong with modern Christian leadership. The story took a much darker turn when the whispers stopped being about just relationships and grief and started turning towards something far more disturbing: allegations of abuse involving the Lamb family's own granddaughter. What began as a tragic story about a widow moving on too quickly after her husband's death suddenly became a painful, chaotic tale of family trauma, cover-ups, and deep emotional damage that no one seemed ready to face.
We will be doing some podcasts with amazing people and get into the nitty-gritty and the deep things. We told a few journalists, our story, and then they have full control of what we've given them. We have no control. We told the truth. They do the investigation. That takes months. It takes a long time. So this is not something that just started now. This has been building. I'm proud of them for doing their due diligence. Yeah. And so I thought the reason I suggested we do this video is because I didn't realize how much it would blow up. Jonathan had kind of an idea. I genuinely didn't. And since we've been on TV so much and people have loved us so genuinely, I felt it was cruel to not answer a few questions that people who genuinely love us want these answers to.
All right, so these are 4 of the most common questions that we've got over the last few days. One is, why didn't we go to the police, and why did it take so long to talk? 2, why did I not put my hands on this man? And 3, why did Susie scream for me to go up versus her just going up herself? And 4, why are we not going public?
Yeah.
It started quietly, almost in the background of the bigger drama. Jonathan and Susie Lamb, the son and daughter-in-law of Marcus and Joni, began noticing strange behavior in their young daughter. She would freeze up around certain people, act nervous in familiar environments, and eventually started showing clear signs that something wasn't right. At first, it seemed like maybe she was just going through a difficult phase, but then, during a family trip in the summer of 2020, she said something that shattered their world. She had seen something that no child should ever see. That moment changed everything. Jonathan and Susie were stunned. They didn't know what to think. The man their daughter described was known to them, someone trusted. He was a part of the Daystar world, someone who had been around the family and the ministry. They tried to stay calm, to process it. But deep inside, they knew they were standing on the edge of something huge, something that could destroy not just their family, but the entire ministry. What followed was a long, painful road of trying to be heard and being ignored.
So let's unpack the first question, is why didn't we go to the police? Well, we did go to the police, actually twice.
I think to answer the second question, why did you wait so long to talk? I would say let's go through the timeline, because I understand in an article, there's a bit of back and forth because it's so complex. So we'll just go in a streamline. We're going to do a super concise version because this is going to be a short video. It'll all keep coming out. We have a little bit of notes here for just the main highlights. So let's pick up from where it all began. I would start with in the summer of 2020. Actually, in early spring 2020, my sister noticed my daughter's behavior being strange, stiffening up when people came close. And I started to notice that too, but I didn't take it very seriously. I thought just part of growing. And then by that summer, on a trip, we're going to be a little careful with our words here. We have to be on a trip. This man says that our daughter walked in on him in a bathroom, saw him full frontal nude. At this point, this is also new to me. I didn't really know what to do with it. I just said, okay. Since he told me, I just said, okay. And I went and checked on my child. She seemed fine. So I was like, okay. I don't know if I even told you or not that day.
Instead of immediate action from the leadership at Daystar, Jonathan and Susie felt silenced. They were told to be careful, to keep it quiet, to talk to teachers, and avoid public accusations. They were encouraged to stay inside the system, to trust the process. But the process was broken. It was slow, passive, and protective. Not of the child, but of the image of Daystar. Even Joni, who was both a mother and a grandmother, didn't respond with the urgency they had hoped for. The family's confidant, someone Susie deeply trusted, told them not to go to the police right away, to wait, to talk to people internally, to avoid making a scene. And that moment of hesitation haunted them, because when they did finally go to the police, they felt the door had already started to close. The trail was cold. The people they trusted had already begun shaping a different narrative. What should have been a clear moment of protection turned into a blurry, emotionally devastating fight, and it got worse.
So, I asked my child. I have no practice with this. I don't know what leading questions are or not. I assumed it was the school. Her world was so small. Home, school, and we'd take her to Daystar. So I assumed it was a school. I asked her, is it at school? She was nervous and just nodding. I found out since, counselors have explained that behavior to me now, and it all adds up, it all makes sense. And I said, was it a girl or a boy? She said a boy. And I said, how tall? Trying to gauge the age. And she said, taller than Daddy. That struck fear in my heart because Dad is a man. A 5-year-old doesn't, know to communicate that. Okay, picking up the pace. Once that happens, we go to the school and, this confidant, the one I trusted, after we talked to the teachers and they said, there's no mail here, it's almost like, okay, we've done our part, case closed. And I told Jonathan, I don't want to get talked out of this. I don't want to have a discussion with your family. Let's go to the police. We went to the police, filed our report. They did a quick little investigation since there was not much to go on.
When their daughter later revealed in graphic detail that she had been molested, the truth hit like a freight train. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't just about a child being afraid. This was real. And now Jonathan and Susie knew they had to act. They pushed for accountability. They wanted answers. But again, they were met with resistance. This time not just from within Daystar, but from their own family. Joni, who by now was increasingly close to Doug Weiss, wasn't offering support in the way they needed. She defended the people they were questioning. She refused to allow outside investigations. She leaned on polygraph tests to prove innocence instead of opening the doors for real justice. For Jonathan and Susie, it felt like betrayal. The deeper they pushed, the more isolated they became. Joni made public statements calling the accusations lies. She claimed to love all her children and grandchildren, but her actions said otherwise. She stood by the accused. She refused to step aside. And more than anything, she refused to listen. At one point, Susie described how their daughter's body went completely limp in fear when she was unexpectedly brought into a room where the alleged abuser was present. The child collapsed under a table, paralyzed by terror. It wasn't normal. It wasn't imagined. It was trauma. And yet, when they brought this to the attention of other family members, some believed them, others didn't. What made the situation even harder was the public pressure. Jonathan and Susie had to choose between protecting their daughter quietly or exposing everything publicly and risking even more pain. In the end, they chose to speak out, not because they wanted revenge or attention, but because they felt they had no other choice. They weren't just trying to protect their child. They were trying to protect other children, other families, and even the legacy of Marcus Lamb that now felt like it was being twisted into something unrecognizable.